Something changed from the 70s to the 80s, and that was the change in how cesareans were done. They changed from the classical cesarean, which was major abdominal surgery, to the bikini cut because my generation of women started to wear bikinis and we didn't want to be left with a scar. And modern people were risk averse. So those 95% of women who labored when I gave birth in 1970 labored whether there was a risk, whether that risk became a problem, whether that problem became a tragedy. We labored whether we had an easy time or a horrible time, whether we suffered or we found it pleasurable, whether it went on for hours or days. Risks were considered to be normal. They are normal. They're a natural part of pregnancy and childbirth. The medical profession just didn't have the sophistication it does now. And so there are more cesareans being performed when women are laboring. And why is that happening? So we have to deconstruct birth into two elements. The far bigger element is women suffering in childbirth. And the suffering has nothing to do with problems. It is directly related to the fact that women lack skills, so they don't cope with the natural occurring pain. And the natural occurring pain can be very intense, and women have no control. So they have no idea whether this labor contraction that they feel is incredibly painful is going to be the last one, or whether it's going to go on for hours and hours and hours. So women get overwhelmed and they lose it, and they suffer. In the medical profession, nobody wants them to suffer. So the medical profession steps up, and more likely or not, you're going to have a cesarean because it's just, let's get the birth over with. And there's also another problem that's occurred since the 80s, which is it's a choice-based childbirth trend. And the advocating, the famous authors, all of the childbirth classes really switched over to choosing to say no to medical interventions, which were implied to be imposed on women and unnecessary, that the ideal birth was a natural birth, that you could only achieve a natural birth by saying no to medical interventions. And so women set themselves up, the society set itself up to have this incredible failure around childbirth. The shame, blame, guilt, disappointment, anger, trauma, frustration that lingers in women for years and years and years and years, because the focus wasn't on 100% of pregnant women who are going to give birth, that giving birth was an activity 100% of birthing women are going to do. The fact that every activity is done best with skills, that we don't have to have a perfect activity to be skilled to do it, that our empowerment comes from our behaviors, our ability to cope and manage, deal with, handle, work through, stay on top and feel in control through pleasurable as well as challenging experiences. That wasn't the emphasis. The emphasis was on the outcome, that the process was natural without interventions, that we can somehow instinctively navigate through this very intense experience and have this highlight orgasmic experience of a natural birth. And instead, we as modern women became more risk averse. We demanded through birth plans that they give us the birth that we wanted. And we've essentially abdicated our involvement in birth. And we feel if somebody says, well, your baby could be at risk, or you've been doing this a long time, we go, okay, have a cesarean, because they're easier. We can be awake. They're more family friendly now. Birthing better families don't have any judgment or value about it. We just know that the unplanned cesareans that are coming from labor, when you have upwards of 40% of the population having surgical births to birth your baby, there's something going on. And from our viewpoint, it's simple. We don't have a skilled birthing population. And so we're hammering it into your head. Become skilled. Prepare your body to let this big object out of your belly, out of your body. It can be out of your belly, or out of your vagina. So prepare your body to do that. Prepare your body to let this object out and learn the skills to cope and manage well. And if you put those two things together, the chances are your labor will end up with a vaginal birth. You may not like it. You may have hated every single second of it. And you may have risks that don't eventuate as problems, or you may have problems that don't eventuate as a problem. So if you end up with a unplanned cesarean after you've labored, what we did was simple. We just continued to use our skills. We just didn't really skip a beat. We had to make a plan. Somebody came in and said, well, we think you need a cesarean, or we think, you've done this long enough, or whatever. Now, most of us as Birthing Better families weren't out of control. We were still managing fine. So most Birthing Better families ended up with unplanned cesareans that had a medical factor to them in which we really felt it was recognizable. We didn't tend to have unplanned cesareans that were because we weren't coping, or that we had long first or second stages. We had prepared our body. We opened our body up. We kept soft inside. So in some ways, the 50 years history of Birthing Better families with the unplanned cesareans is very different. Most of us labored and had vaginal births. A percent of us had non-laboring cesareans, and a percent of us had cesareans after labor because there really was a defined medical reason. And we just never skipped a beat. We went from using our skills, and we continued to use our skills while we were being prepped and in the birth of our baby, because it was our baby's birth, and we wanted to just get every moment we could of involvement out of it. It was precious to us. We wanted to remember our baby's birth fondly. We didn't want to be disengaged and disconnected. So that's what we encourage you to do. You're now part of the Birthing Better family. If you've prepared your body for birth, if you've learned the skills to cope, and you have a labor and you use the skills, and you still find that you have an unplanned cesarean, just keep using your skills through your baby's birth. It's not rocket science, not hard to do. Nobody's going to stop you. The medical profession's just trying to help you and help your baby. So keep birthing your baby with skills.